encourage, and inspire. My name is Jamie Johnson. I'm your host, a clinical therapist working in the field of mental health for the last 10 years. I believe this podcast is God-led and God-inspired. Thank you for joining me again as we peel back the layers of mental health from a faith perspective. If you want to reach me, send me a question. You can do so at faithlovetherapy@gmail.com. You can send a question that you'd like to be answered on the show or discussed on the show. You can even send it anonymously if you'd like. Just state that you don't want to be named in the letter. You can also find me on Instagram at Faith, Love, and Therapy Podcast. That's Faith, Love, and Therapy Podcast on Instagram. And if you catch us on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Again, all of those social media platforms will help us to grow and to share more about mental health from a faith perspective. So today we are going a little bit beyond the surface in terms of how we feel. But often we tend to talk about our feelings in a way that can be very surface level. And that's from a place that is just comfortable and more palatable. Sometimes it's more acceptable depending on if we're male or female, depending on where we're sharing our feelings. Sometimes being able to say things like I'm angry or I'm frustrated is more palatable than going deeper with the emotions that are feeding that particular anger or frustration. So, even if we dig a little deeper into the issue of anger, because I think that's a good one to start with, it's not necessarily a primary emotion. It's considered more of a secondary emotion. So that there are things that are underneath anger that feed anger. We tend to get stuck with, I was just angry. And that's okay. I think anger is a real natural emotion, but go beyond the surface. If you do follow me on Instagram, I shared a picture of an umbrella and it had embarrassment in the umbrella. And underneath the umbrella, it had several other emotions that could fall under or typically do fall under embarrassment, like shame, a number of, worry, sadness. All of those things contribute to are underneath embarrassment. So going deeper helps us to really expose what's happening with us. So like I said, if we take anger, many people are fine with expressing that. And we've noticed, it's kind of been proven that it is more acceptable for men to be angry. Women, yes, we can be angry, but I think men are known to use that particular emotion rather than say things like, I'm hurt. This is not, I don't want to generalize because there are many men that are becoming, very clear about how they feel and what they're dealing with. But this is just, for an example. So oftentimes if we allow ourselves to really peel back what's happening when we feel angry, we could find that there is definitely hurt. I was hurt by a particular situation, and because I was hurt, I don't want to be hurt again. I don't want to be vulnerable. And so that wall becomes anger or frustration. It becomes defensiveness. There are a lot of things that it helps me to feel like I can protect myself if I'm angry versus I'm coming from a place of hurt or vulnerability. There could be sadness underneath that anger. There could be just feeling overwhelmed and I don't have the patience or the tolerance right now to deal with it. There can actually be anxiety underneath anger, when there are certain situations, and I've seen it a couple of times where anxiety is formed, and instead of responding anxiously and what we naturally think is an anxious response, it looks like anger. And that's from a place of defense. That's a place of fear. And so we'll label all of these things as anger, and there's so many things that are underneath. Several studies have come out with, particularly Black women and the feelings of anxiety and as well as depression being displayed as anger. And so we have to look beyond what we think we're seeing. Sometimes there's an issue with unforgiveness, and I think that's something to really tap into. Is anger could really, really manifest because I'm struggling to move beyond this particular issue or this particular person's offense. And so the anger is natural, but if I go deeper and really address the fact that I am hurting or I am not able to forgive this person or able to let go of this particular issue, I would see that there's something more. There's something that I really need to deal with. So how would I advise going beyond that top layer and really looking at what's going on. First, I would say ask, what am I thinking about before that particular emotion arises? What am I thinking about while I'm in the midst of that emotion? And what's happening after? What am I thinking about after? Really asking yourself these questions. And you're not going to ask yourself these questions unless you really want to know what's going on with you and you want to make some changes in how you're responding or how you're feeling. But the first thing I would say is ask yourself some hard questions. Not hard in the sense of complex, but hard in the sense of you have to be honest with you about what you're really dealing with. What's on my mind that is contributing to how I feel and thus how I behave before I engage in this particular response, while I'm engaging in this particular response, and after. So having to process, which we typically do in therapy, is process particular situation to explore and break down what was happening. Because most of the time, if you think about when you are responding, when you're in the moment, there's not a whole lot of processing happening. So many times in therapy, we'll say, okay, slow down and pause. We'll focus on just getting breath. And people come to therapy and they're like, I don't want people telling me how to breathe. But the breathing is to start being more present with what is happening on the inside of you. It's to slow things down. It's to think clearer. It's to refocus your attention so that everything is not going 10,000 miles a minute, but it's slowing down so that you can be able to process and be able to explore and be able to respond rather than to react in a way that is not healthy. So ask yourself the questions that you need to ask in order to know what's truly going on. Practice slowing yourself down so that you can begin to be more present and aware of what's happening with you. Second, I would say, pause. So observe what's happening physically. What is happening on the inside? Also, assess what has changed. Sometimes we'll notice a mood or a shift in how we feel very quickly. And being able to really pause and assess is important. I think sometimes we'll say, I've been real irritable for a week. I don't know what's going on. Or I've had a short fuse, or I haven't had the energy since such and such amount of time. And, on the couch, which I say, for clients on the couch, they'll say, and I don't know why I feel like this. I'm like, okay, well, tell me the time frame that this change started. And they'll say, it was probably 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I'll start with, well, did anything major happen? Many of them say, no, not really. And then through the process of open-ended questions and asking, exploratory questions, they begin to recall. Oh, I had this conversation with so-and-so, and I knew immediately I felt rejected. And then I just was, disappointed. And so I kind of cut them off, and there was a trickle down effect. And so being aware of what is happening or what has happened, being able to slow down, pause, and assess why a change occurred is extremely important. It allows you to be more in touch with what is happening with you. We often get lost in what's going on around us, that when we slow down and pause and assess, we have to take really inventory of what has happened, what we've been exposed to, what has been said to us, what we've overheard, what we've had to deal with, what load we're carrying. So really take a pause, slow down, and observe and assess the change. Then be able to reflect. So ponder on why. And that's what I was saying. When we do that processing, be able to ask why once you start to highlight, okay, these things happened. Okay, why did they affect me in the way that they affected me? That allows you to answer or to get to a root cause. Typically, it allows you to get down to something that is beyond the surface level. I think that when we are able to get beyond the surface level, it allows us to heal at a different level. It allows things to go beyond just, this is how I feel, to this is how I'm behaving. This is how my life is being impacted. This is how I'm impacting other people because of the things that I think and feel and do. And so being able to go deeper in your emotional wellness is extremely important. Understanding the layers that it impacts. I think that's why being able to reflect, because, excuse me, oftentimes we see we see things repeated within generation, right? We see whether it's people will say, oh, I have a temper like my grandfather, or, I am quiet like my dad. There are things that in mannerisms, behaviors, interactions that we repeat generation after generation. And so we need to see the layers of impact that our behavior, our thoughts, our feelings are having. And we can't do that if we're just staying on the surface, if we're just staying on what is the first thing that comes to mind, or the most acceptable or the most palatable emotion. But if we dig deeper, then we can look at the layers of impact that it's having, not only on our lives, but the lives of people around us and those that we love, our children, our nieces, our nephews, our friends, our spouse, all of those individuals are impacted by our willingness to work on our emotional wellness. And if there's not a willingness to work on that, then know that those layers are going to suffer. Those layers are going to be impacted significantly when we're not willing to do some of the real work. So also understanding that feelings do not die. Just because you're not acknowledging them, they haven't gone anywhere. Feelings are seeds. Feelings will grow. Feelings will manifest in different ways if we're not dealing with them, if we're not addressing what is real and what's really happening on the inside of us. So feelings do not die. They are seed, and we have to acknowledge them if we're choosing a wellness journey, an emotional wellness journey. The next thing I would say is that, we are our responsibility. And I'm not taking anything away from the Creator. I think He is our creator. He is our sustainer. He is our provider, our protector. He is our all in all. He also has given us wisdom. He's given us the ability to and the power to make choices. And so there are some responsibilities. We have to know our level of responsibility for ourselves and our well-being. And so how we respond, how we react is something that we have control over, and that we have to make a concerted effort daily to check in with ourselves, to ensure that we're getting better, that we are taking steps forward in the direction that we are called to go. And in a lot of us, the direction that we want to be in, we have to really assess if we're being held back by the things that we're not dealing with, the things that we haven't allowed ourselves to process and allowed God to heal. Are we stuck in particular situations or a state, or feeling like we just can't move beyond this place in our life because we won't go deeper emotionally, because we won't be honest about the emotional impact that it's having on who we've become? And that's significant. I think sometimes we can pretend, or we can create this persona that is so strong, that is so unbothered, so self involved, that I don't really need to do all this. I don't need to do all this because I've achieved that and I've achieved this. But there's always a level of depth that we will not reach when we're unwilling to allow God the access to heal the things that have affected us. And He doesn't heal things that we're lying about. He's a God of, truth. He wants us to know the truth about ourselves, about Him, and about ourselves. And so because of that, why would he address something? Why would He try to fix something without first bringing it to your attention so that you can see it plainly? So that you can see it plainly, because then when you see it plainly, then there's a willingness to come to Him openly and say, God, I see what this has done, and I need you to walk alongside me in this healing process. So He does not deal with, false sense of self. And so we are our responsibility in being able to really take responsibility for the things that have occurred and really walk this journey of healing is important. The next thing I think, if you're not addressing particular feelings, if you're not addressing your emotional well-being, they're going to control you. There are things that are just going to control you. And I kind of touched on that a minute ago. So feelings are not supposed to necessarily dictate your behavior. They're only cues. They're only supposed to draw your attention to what is happening on the inside of you or what's impacting you. So if let's say I feel a sense of shame about something, and that manifests as me being shy or embarrassed or withdrawn. What it's drawing the attention to is the issue of shame and what I have not allowed myself to be forgiven of, or that I am extremely critical of without giving myself, grace, allowing a sense of grace. And sometimes that can really, manifest into kind of this, and I want to choose my words carefully, but this level of selfishness because we are consumed with what we are not. And so because of that, we pull back and others can't see what's really going on with us or really engage with us because there's this sense of shame. And so it looks like I'm just shy and kind of withdrawn, but I'm holding back on who I am because I haven't really allowed God to deal with those issues that have caused the shame. So understand that those feelings are not to dictate how you respond or react in a moment. They are to give you a cue as to what needs to be addressed by yourself and by the Father. And so sometimes our feelings are wrong. And I know in therapy, we're often like, well, what are you feeling? What was that feeling about? But understanding that sometimes we're feeling offended and there was no offense or there was no intent on offending us. And so the feeling of offense is wrong because it's probably something other, more so that on the side of I feel embarrassed or I feel it's tapping into that place of my internal critic that's already, doing its own thing. And so being aware of, is my feeling a true representation of what is happening in this moment? Or is it something related to how I'm already feeling or what I'm already dealing with? Assess, assess, assess. You've got to assess. You got to ask yourself the questions to really go beyond just that feeling, that initial response. Feelings are access points. So the importance of really understanding what's happening with you. And even that, where the Bible speaks of guarding your heart, I think the Bible reminds us to guard our heart because it's such an access point, because there's so much that could be impacted by how we're feeling and what we do as a result of how we're feeling. So that a particular feeling, whether it's anger, and anger could be an access point for abuse. It could be an access point for anxiety. It could be an access point for behavior that is unlike you because you're responding from that place of anger. So there are things that can access your spirit out of that space of emotional, out of that space of unhealing, that area that has not been healed. So be careful as to what you're doing when you're being aware, when you're becoming more aware of what you're feeling. Thoughts, feelings, behavior, all of those things are connected. So understanding that, getting your feelings can cause you to open a door to something unhealthy. It can also, close the door to something great. So not staying in that place of emotion, being aware of it, knowing how to respond and know what it's giving you, what it's drawing your attention to is incredibly important. But don't stay in that place of being ruled by your emotions. Excuse me, because being ruled by your emotions is not what we were created to do. They're a useful tool, but we're not created to be ruled by our emotions. So we have to understand the root cause. We have to understand the root and what is real. God, wants to heal all of those things that are impacting us in such a negative way. And so he reveals so that it can be healed. and understanding the importance of really being honest about what's going on underneath the surface, what's going on underneath that umbrella. We have to pinpoint the truth, within the root. So sometimes, some of us will say, well, I struggle with low self-esteem. And I've really been digging in that. I'm really trying to explore that a bit. And I'm sure I'll have some more episodes on that, because my thought is that there is a connection to envy, as much as that feels hard to say. But if I feel low about myself, something had to convince me. And it may have been someone who put that in me, but then there's something that continues to sustain that feeling of low self-esteem. And I wonder if, there's a sense of envy when I look at other people. Do I compare myself? When I look at what others have achieved, when I look at, what others, how others are succeeding, is there a little bit of, envy in that? So being able to look at the truth that's in the root. I said embarrassment. There's a connection. Is there a connection to shame and pride? Dig a little deeper. Anger. Is there, as I said, a connection to unforgiveness? So, we often ask God to search our heart and show us what's underneath. And so we need to be prepared to see what's really underneath and be responsible for taking it to Him so that He can heal what is actually real, and what has been revealed, because then we can start to move in a direction that allows us to grow and develop and to impact generations. So I'm hoping that with this, you're able to ask yourself some questions, begin to assess, begin to explore, begin to really identify and be present with what is underneath that umbrella. It's not just one emotion. There are several things. There are things that are feeding it. There are other emotions. There are experiences. There are words. So ask the right questions, analyze or assess the situation. What caused the shift and the change within you, so that you can see what's really going on underneath. I hope that this was beneficial for you. I hope that you come back next time, and I thank you for joining me on Faith, Love, and Therapy. Take care.